Welcome back, players. I'm Jack with 36 Cancel, and this is Coco the Weiss Cat, and we're back with another Konosuba Deck tech for you. So we've done 4 Konosuba videos on this channel already, 5 if you include the box opening, 2 deck profiles from Konosuba 1, and then 2 revisitations on those decks once Set 2 came out. It was really exciting to take a look at what happened with our decks featuring Megumin, Yunyun, Aqua, and Eris. But if you know anything about the show, you know that we're missing one of the best parts. Our favorite Crusader, and best girl by a long shot, Darkness. She's finally here with a deck of her own for us to profile. Darkness is my favorite girl in the show next to Wiz, and I'm super happy to finally give her the deck profile she deserves. But a big point here is that we had to wait until Set 2. It's not like Darkness didn't have cards in Set 1. In fact, a lot of her cards weren't bad at all. A lot of Set 1 Darkness cards are in the deck that we have in front of us now. The problem was really that as compared to other characters, she had almost no cards to work with. You could technically make a mono-yellow deck in Set 1, but you needed to combine Darkness with Chris and Kozma, and in Set 1, it just wasn't great. Playable? Yes, but not amazing by any stretch. But Set 2 changed the game. Now, with a lot of new Darkness cards, the Set 1 gems we had before finally get to shine. Primarily, Set 2 gave us a totally new level 1 combo and actual Darkness finishers. Before, Darkness had no climax combos at level 1 or level 3, but even then, when you look at this deck, you'll see that we still have a very decent mix of Set 1 and 2. And the level 0 is a great example of this, and a great place to start this deck tech. Let's kick off the level 0 game with a neat little Darkness we've seen before. It's Middle of a Journey Darkness. She's a 3k promo that, if you have 3 or more cards in your clock, gets plus 1k. It's worth mentioning here that damage happens before battle, so if your opponent attacks with this and you don't meet the conditions for the plus 1k, there's a chance he could be facing a surprise extra 1k. And this is a great level 0 that's overstated with no real downside, and that's kind of the idea going into our second front row character. Swimsuit Darkness is the card art on our sleeves and our deck box, and my favorite foil from Set 2, and she's not bad at all. As long as you have 2 or less stock, she gets plus 1500 power, so she's another 4k level 0 with no real downside. You might say that our front row is kind of meaty, if you know what I mean, but fuck it if I'm complaining. Anyway, our front row brings a lot of power to the table from both Set 1 and 2. Going back to Set 1 quickly, we have another Darkness we've seen in a previous deck tech. It's Bonafide Pervert Darkness. She has a pretty interesting effect. On your opponent's turn, she gets plus X, where X is 4k times the level of the card facing her. So in theory, she can actually become 14,000. And at the beginning of your opponent's attack phase, you can move her to an open position of your center stage with a character facing her. So much like Darkness, she can run in front of danger and get a rise out of doing it. She's a nasty little surprise for any early play level 1s or boosted 0s. And even if she's not directly countering something, running a 2k body into something for free at level 0 isn't bad in a lot of situations. She's very useful for us, and she's a great example of a Set 1 card that just needed a little more support to shine in her own deck. And there are no shortage of those, trust me. Let's transition to the back row to check out one big reason why. Special Talent is Fantasizing Darkness is a sleeper card that I've been waiting for a long time to use. Do you remember Woe Class from our old Abyssals deck tech? Well, she's actually kind of like that. You can pay 1, tap her, and clock yourself to search for any adventurer character. She was tough to work into other decks, but in a mono-yellow Darkness deck, she's as amazing as Woe Class. Now, she does have the plus 1k on Climax phase just like Woe, but you actually do have to play a Climax to get it, so she's not a 1-to-1 copy. In fact, she's a little worse, but that's not really the point. The point is that Fantasizing Darkness is an amazing card, and it's a cornerstone of this new deck. Now, even though this deck is mostly Darkness, there are some side characters that did sneak their way into this lineup. Chris, a Brainstormer we've seen before, thiefed her way in. A tap 2 Brainstormer that hands out 1500 power to the middle center on your turn. Now, she searches for an adventure character, but she can also search for any yellow character. There's only 2 characters in the deck that aren't adventurer, but that's pretty good. It's a bit redundant, but it hammers in that she's perfect for this new Darkness deck. And finally, Kozma lurked his way into our lineup. Sniped Kozma is a pretty interesting new level 0. It's a clock switch reverser, which is pretty good, but when it's reversed, you can also choose a card in your opponent's clock and put it into their waiting room, and then make them take a damage from the top. So you can snipe a card from your opponent's clock like this. And if used right, this can be a pretty cool ability. You can use it to narrow down the ideal choices your opponent has to level with, or even lock them out of a color or an experience card, and if they top clock a Climax for the effect, that's a dead cancel. Overall, Sniped Kozma is a great level 0, and it makes a lot of sense that he's in this mono-yellow deck. And that's our level 0. It's big power, lots of good searches, and awesome clock swapping technology. It's pretty solid actually, in a kind of old-fashioned way. A lot of decks have strayed away from generic big power and single searches, choosing instead to run stock bombs, top checkers, and small runners. But Darkness proves that they're still here and they're still great cards. You're sure not to be disappointed at level 0 when you grab Darkness. Alright, moving on to level 1. There's a very obvious interloper here, and it's Shaken Megumin. That's right, this 1-0 anti-change that we've seen so many times before makes it into this deck because honestly, it's just too important. Even threatening anti-change is so powerful with all the amazing early plays in English that not running it might put us in serious danger. Pitch 2 an anti-change at level 1. Let's just take one moment to remember how valuable that is sometimes, and get on with the more exciting parts of level 1. Iron Crusader Darkness is the new and shiny level 1 combo that Set 2 gave us for our Darkness deck. She gets plus 1500 when she attacks so long as you have another adventurer or magic character. It's kind of nice that she doesn't need to climax to get that power. But if you do have a climax called Subduing Even My Heart, when she reverses her opponent, you get to search for an adventure or magic character. Honestly, this is a pretty standard reverse searcher, and it's not nearly as busted as the new Aqua or the new Union. But keep in mind that Darkness didn't have any level 1 combos before this, and even if it's not super busted, it does meet the basic bar of value. 7k with a climax is an okay power to reverse some targets with, and the deck has good power boosts to hand out as well, so I'll gladly take it. Since that's our level 1 combo, let's take a quick look at something from set 1 that we run as a somewhat meatier frontline. Seems Happy Darkness is a 1-1-7-5 that gets plus 500 for each character in your back row. So an 8-5 if you got that strong backline going, and when she gets reversed, you take a damage and rest her. It's a more classic ability that heralds back to the days of Modica set 1, but this Darkness is pretty big, and your opponent will have trouble getting rid of her. It's a bit of a riskier choice since you can end up taking damage from her, but like all things that come with downsides, it's just about playing around it and maximizing the power that comes with that price. In short, just play over it when you're done, and let it ride while 8500 is too big for your opponent to climb over. Now, there's one more card in this level 1 lineup, and it's some masked dude called Vanir. He's actually one of the Demon King's generals, but who cares? When he gets reversed, if his opponent is cost 0 or lower, he can stock bomb it, which is more than okay. It does turn off a lot of good combos and stop your opponent from saving their characters, but this card has another ability. When it's put into your waiting room, you can pay 3 and pitch a climax. That's a pretty high cost, so I think you know where this might be going. If you do pay it, you can choose a card called Power of the Masked Darkness and put it onto the stage at any position as rest. And yes, that's one of our level 3s. It's actually a main part to our finishing package, and she does some really cool stuff for us even without a climax. But we'll get to her later. For now, let's focus on the fact that this level 1 can change to a level 3 even if your opponent tries to get rid of it, and that it's still a pretty good card even without that change effect. Stepping back, our level 1 is classic with a little new spicy technology mixed in. A reverse searcher, a 1-1 automatic clock encore, with a level 1 anti-change, and a cost 0 bomb that doubles as a level 3 change. This is pretty interesting, and I like it a lot. It may not be super busted, but the flexible change is awesome and the reliability is there. Changing into your level 3 won't always be the right play, but the fact that you can, even when it's not your turn, is cool as shit. But that's where the level 1 wraps up, so let's move up the ladder. As per usual, the level 2 is much smaller. Our level 2 only has one card in it, which is kind of funny since all of Darkness's old climax combos from set 1 were at level 2. But the only card here is actually from set 1, and it's a box topper promo. Petite Darkness is a 2-1 9500 that can't attack if you don't have any cards in your clock, and that's pretty funny. But she also has the ability that when you play her, you can take a damage and give her plus 4500 power until the end of turn. So this can be a 2-1 13-5 when it comes out, and that's a spice to meet the ball. Petite Darkness may be small, but she's meaty, and she's undercosted power to the letter. Not to mention that I love playing Poochie and Petite cards, and I love it even more when they're good. This might be a small level 2, but it does its job beautifully. Petite Darkness, IMHO, is the perfect card to bridge that sometimes awkward gap in between levels 1 and 3, and I'm very satisfied with it. Now we've got a kind of top-heavy level 3 here, a 4-4-2 split, but there's a level 3 we've mentioned before, so let's kick off with her. Power of the Masked Darkness has several abilities. First, she's a Mikasa clone. You can pay 1 at the start of your opponent's attack phase and switch her with another character as stand, so you can steer her away from threats, which is nice. Then, if she's in your center stage, if you don't cancel damage, you can look at the top card of your deck and choose to put it into your waiting room or keep it there. A damage check. Usually cards with this ability are pretty bad, but hear me out, because she has a third ability. At the beginning of your climax phase, you can put this card into your waiting room. If you do, you can put a card called Duke of Hell Vanir from your waiting room onto this card's previous position. So, as it turns out, Power of the Masked Darkness is actually only half the picture. And here's the other half. Duke of Hell Vanir, on your turn he gets plus 2k. So it's kind of nice that he's not actually an 8-5, but this Duke gives us something else that's pretty neat. When damage dealt by him is cancelled, you mill the top card and deal X, where X is level plus 1. So Duke of Hell is actually a good Musashi, and that makes him a pretty good finisher, especially considering this deck is a bit top heavy. But he's not done yet. At the beginning of your opponent's draw phase, you can put him into your waiting room. If you do, you can choose a card called Power of the Masked Darkness and put it on the stage where this card was, and then that card gets plus 2500 power until end of turn. Are you starting to see how this works? So each climax phase, you switch from Masked Darkness back to Vanir. Then each draw phase your opponent has, you switch back into Darkness. This is kind of how it worked in the show when Darkness got possessed by this dude for a while and was totally into it, and that's pretty cool. What else is pretty cool is that the Musashi effect on Vanir procs every time he's put on the stage by the change effect, and that makes him the only reusable good Musashi in English that I know of. But consider this, you can actually start this nonsense at level 1. Since both of them change for free and can run away from trouble, it's actually pretty tough to get rid of them without hard anti-change. It makes the early change a lot more appealing too. Starting at level 1, you can run around a reusable Musashi and a damaged top checker. That's pretty annoying to deal with, honestly, and it can get you a pretty nice lead if you can keep them around. So paired together, this is a pretty interesting finishing suite. But there's more. We have one more darkness to cover, and that's Setting Off Darkness. She's in here as an alternative level 3 for us. Now she heals when she comes in, which is kind of nice. And then, with her climax combo, you can pay 1 when she attacks and give a character plus 2k power and burn 2 on cancel. Not a bad deal, and her climax is a stock soul, so that rounds us out pretty nicely. It's not like we have other combos we're really trying to run. In set 1, Darkness had 2 level 2 combos, neither of which were very good, so honestly, for a multitude of reasons, I'd rather see this. She's not a super amazing blowout finisher, but she's a nice way to round off our level 3, and indeed, the deck. The level 3 in this deck has the only reusable Musashi in English, and 2 cards can come out at level 1 if you really want to get technical about it. Honestly, it's not bad at all. In fact, I'd argue that this is actually a pretty effective setup for closing the game. I really like the new level 3s that set 2 gave us. They're a huge addition for Darkness, and a big reason a Darkness deck is even possible. And looking at it once again as a whole, I'm super happy that it is. I waited a long time for this deck to become a thing. I can't wait to play it out, but just so it's a bit more accessible, let's go over some general tips. Starting the game, one thing to remember is that your level 0s are vulnerable to Suiciders and Stock Bombs, so don't rely overly on their juicy power alone, but they are juicy, so you might get more than one swing out of them. And look for your back row early in the game. The sooner you have the option to Brainstorm and Power Boost with Chris and Clock Search with a special talent, the better. Because this deck has very little waiting room interaction, it's a good idea to search out your key targets early with Fantasizing Darkness. Just be careful, because paying a stock and clocking yourself each turn can add up. At level 1, you have a really big question to answer. Do I want to go for the big nut play and start the Vanir shenanigans? It's really going to come down to deck knowledge and being able to answer the question, does my opponent have the proper tools to deal with this? Check their waiting room actively and see what they're discarding. Early on, look for tools that could be a threat to your change target. Changing into this and getting anti-changed immediately is a pretty big blowout, and the cost is pretty high too. Throwing away a climax is no joke either if you're trying to keep the damage up. So I'll go back to the advice I gave concerning the Yami early play from 2 Love Ru. It can be powerful and tough to deal with, but it costs a lot and you can get blown out, so use it carefully. Also, at level 1, look for juicy reverse targets for your combo, and don't run Seems Happy Darkness into Suiciders or losing battles. Basic stuff. Use Iron Crusader to search out some stuff to play at level 2, and a finisher or 2. And speaking of that, your level 2 is pretty straightforward. By now you should be holding on to some finishers and lay down 1 or 2 Petite Darkness if you need to play something. They're a generic great card to lay down, and sometimes that's exactly what you need. Sometimes it's very worth to use the Clock Boost just to run over some of your opponent's early plays. You actually have some great answers to decks that lay down their whole level 3 lineup at level 2, so keep that in mind. And level 3 is super basic for you. You're looking to lay down Musashi Vanirs to ensure your damage sticks. If you have the combo, Setting Out Darkness is also a great solution, since you probably won't be able to support 3 changes. Unless your opponent has like 6 climaxes and 12 or less cards, this lineup should get you the W. If for some reason they do survive all this cancel burn, you still have damaged top checks. And if you do manage to change more than once, you get multiple triggers from Power of the Masked Darkness. And don't forget that they gain power if you change at the draw phase, and then you can move them around to run vulnerable characters away from easy reverses. But unless you're pretty unlucky, the game will probably end when you lay down your Musashis. Vanniers. So, what can we say about the Darkness deck? Well, is it super busted? Probably not, but it's got a lot of that classic, somewhat generic power that's just hard to deny. The characters are pretty damn thick. You've got Musashi finishers, 13-5 level 2s, and a pretty compelling level 3 early play at level 1. If I was going to say anything about this in regards to Konosuba, I'd really emphasize how differently this deck plays in comparison to the other Konosuba decks we've looked at. Each main girl got a new level 1 combo, and they're all reverse combos, but Darkness is the only one that wasn't a top check. It's the only deck with a level 3 that comes out at level 1, and the only deck with change effects that are repeatable for that matter. All in all, Darkness has a pretty different deck style, and it's super interesting to play around with it. I love how much different her flavor is than the other girls, because let's face it, Darkness is her own animal. Alright players, this wraps up our Konosuba deck profiles. There's no set 3 yet, so we probably won't see any new ones for a while, but you will see me piloting these decks a lot in the coming year, and speaking of that, 2019 is fresh and new. I have a ton of new content planned for this year, and I can't wait to get started, so stay tuned. And on that note, and as always, thanks for watching. Peace.